Hello guys, my name is Visklugers and welcome to Armored Warfare and another tank review. And this time it'll be from the Shishkins tree, the T62 Tier 3 main battle tank. And we'll be checking quickly on the stats, that how it compares to other Tier 3 main battle tanks in the game. The Leopard 1, the M60 and the Object 155. And then we will have a couple of replays to have some kind of idea how some casual action will be like. So let's start with the hit points. The T62 fully upgraded has 1060 hit points without any extra modules, no retrofits, nothing. That is quite at the low end of the market. The average being 1161, so it is lacking a bit. The only main battle tank having less hit points than the T62 is the Object 155 with only 990 hit points. If you compare that to the M60, which has 1310 hit points, you really have quite a big difference there. The M60 having almost like 30%, almost 30%, like 25% more hit points is quite huge. What it loses in hit points, it gains in armor. Its hull armor 102mm in the front, 79 at the sides and 46 at the rear. And the 102mm in the front is a little bit tricky because it is very heavily angled. So the effective armor is somewhere around more than 200. I don't know exactly how much it is, but it is around 200mm, I feel. It is very effective. And the turret armor is 242 in the front, 122 in the side, and 55 in the rear. And it's very round turret and angled. So it's really hard to penetrate the turret. The only real way to penetrate the turret is right at the back of the turret, or at the or the cupolas. But the cupolas are quite tricky targets if the target is a bit further away, or if the target is wiggling its turret. So it is really hard to hit those, and quite often they even don't make any damage. They just damage the viewports but won't do any actual points of damage to the vehicle. So armor wise it is very effective. The turret is almost impervious to fire. Of course high explosive will do every time some damage, but it's very minor. The whole armor it will hold against small caliber fire, but when you start to face main battle tanks at point blank range or whatever, it's gonna falter. It's not that good. So it's like an armor that you can't fully rely on except you're facing autocannons, but it will save your ass a lot of the times. Now mobility wise, its top speed is 50.4 kilometers per hour, which is okay. It's pretty good. The average is 53.1, so it is around there. So nothing out of the ordinary there. The only one being faster being the Leopard 1, which is a speed demon in comparison. Now the acceleration is 8.5 seconds, which is it feels slow, but it's actually faster than the M60 and the Object 155 by half a second. So while it's not fast in the main battle tank standards, it is still faster than most of the tanks. Now overall mobility, the traversing and so on, it's fairly sluggish. It's not very good at turning and being off-road, but it's okay. It's not bad, but it's not very good either. Now, the tank's vision, 392 meters, which is good. It's really good. It's only a little bit lower than the Leopard 1's, but it's massively better than the M60 or the Object 155. And surprisingly enough, the camo rating is the best, 0.17, and the average being only 0.10. It's a lot better than the Leopard 1, which kind of relies on not being seen, I feel. Which is just really surprising. I would have thought the Leopard 1 would have been sneaky, but apparently T62 is sneaky tank. Now let's get to the main meat of this tank, the firepower. Now the alpha damage is 309 with AP shells and 368 with the heat shells. Now the average of these shells are 267 points of damage and 322. So the T62 has a lot of alpha damage. And its penetration isn't bad either. 237 with AP and 197 with heat. They are a little bit higher than the average on tier 3 main battle tanks, but boy is that alpha damage good. It's really good, and you can really bring big hurt to armored fighting vehicles and tank destroyers that does not have that much HP. Now the DPM wise, with AP shells 2055, which is actually a bit lacking, the average being 2106, so it's not lacking a lot, it's pretty much there, so it's very comparable to the other vehicles. Now the heat is 2647, which is 200 points more, well almost 200 points more than the average on tier 3 main battle tanks, which is 2468 or 69. And that really shows the alpha damage on the heat shells is just so much higher than anyone else's that it really stacks up the damage. Now, of course, because the alpha damage is so high, the rate of fire is not that great. It's the worst of all tier 3 main battle tanks, being 6.65 rounds per minute. So the reload is 9.02 seconds, which is not great. But you have to remember, huge alpha comes with slow rate of fire. Now the accuracy it's not great. 0.17 is not great, but it's still not the worst. The Object 155 has the worst, which is the 0.2, but the Leopard had 0.13, which is drastically better. The M60 only has the same, so it is a bit lacking in that regard. The aiming time 3.5 seconds, which is the longest of any tier 3 main battle tank, and you can really feel the aiming time when you're swinging your turret around and so on. It really takes quite some time to get used to. But the turret traverse speed is not a problem. 40.8 degrees per second. It is by far the fastest on the tier 3 main battle tanks. Hell, the average is 27.2. It has 40.8 or almost 41. It is absurdly fast. So while the tank is quite sluggish, the turret traverse speed is really good. So it is very hard for fast moving targets to circle strafe you to death, because you can simply turn your turret around so fast. The gun depression isn't that great. The gun depression at the front is 6 degrees and at the side, at the rear 4 degrees. So you will kinda run into some problems with that, but not into huge ones. It's workable. You can and will, or at least you should, get used to it. It's not great, but at least it's quite consistent, because when you're using the Leopard 1, for instance, it's got 9 degrees at the front and only 2.5 at the rear. So the difference is like night and day. If you get surprised and you have to put your gun for some reason at the back, you suddenly can't put it down anymore. While in the T62 the difference isn't that big. But you will find a lot of spots that you would like to use, but the gun just won't work because of the gun depression. So let's quickly summarize the statistics. So the tank isn't very fast. It isn't like super slow, but it isn't very fast. But it doesn't really need to be, because you kind of want to be in the heat of action, because you have that much armor. But you can't really just go full ham on your armor unless you know that the enemy has like no chance of penetrating you. And if you're not the big tank on the block, if you're the baby tank of the team, let's say you're facing tier 4s and 5s, they're gonna blow through your armor very easily. Well, in that case, you can use your phenomenal turret armor and your fairly good view range for a main battle tank and the best camo of its tier to find a location, preferably on a small hill, where you can hide your hull. Now, your accuracy will be a problem, but pretty much the aiming speed, not a problem. Armor, not so much problem. So you can kind of neglect these kind of things. And at first, if you play a couple of games against the PvE, you really start to be like that. I can just take the beating and go full ham, and quite often you can. But once you go into the PvP mode, you really need to start conserve your hit points, and maybe start a bit more defensive and take a defensive position where where it's really hard to dig you out. If you can just show your turret, you're in a really strong position. And since you can take huge chunks of the enemy's hit points with a single heat shell or even AP shell, you can safely go back to your hidey hole or behind a building and reload, while the enemies quite often have to stay in the line of fire and put out that DPM. You really don't need to put out that DPM, you just have the raw alpha damage to punish a lot of people. But if you are using this tank as a platoon or a division or whatever it's called, it's really strong tank in that aspect, because if you have 3 of these vehicles and you just go on full on Fury Road, hit the pedal to the metal, and you find a lone tank, it pretty much needs to just you just really need that all the 3 of you just connect 1 shot each, and the enemy tank should be obliterated pretty much immediately. Because really, even if you face another T62, you have 369 alpha damage, which stacks up to well over 1,000 damage. And the T62 only has 1,060 hit points, so it's very likely that you just obliterate him without a sweat. Now let's take a look at actual gameplay. So here we have pretty nice matchup, only tier 3 vehicles. So we're very effective with our armor and with our gun. So I decide to take quite an aggressive position, since we can take the beating, at least to some degree. And there are not a lot of main battle tanks in our team, so someone has to take the someone has to take the beating. So if the armored fighting vehicles or the tank destroyers get spotted, they're dead meat. If I get spotted in the T62, well, that's a quite different story, especially if I get to a nice position. And these small ridges provide excellent cover, and I need to just show the minimum amount of tank to the enemy. Now this is a very, very good defensive area. Quite a lot of space to move around. I can easily expose only my turret or very little at my hull, and I can get out quite easily. Now, if I wouldn't be tunnel visioning this much, I would have seen that guy a lot faster, but it doesn't matter. Now, here I can just easily pull back and reload. Pop out of their radar and then take another peek. Now the only problem with this is that you can see on the minimap that all my allies are bunched up behind me. So even though there is some kind of armored fighting vehicle just pouring fire in here, he cannot penetrate me. But I can't see him because no one is spotting. And the view range, while it's okay, it's not that good.
Loader, heat. Loader, Sabo.
This position is kind of a blessing and a curse, in the sense that I am very safe here, but I can't really go anywhere else. Well, I can fall back, but going into the city it's just not a good idea, because then I would be alone. And I can't go forward. Well, I could, but there's so many enemies that they really start to nail me here. And the reason why I took their 2 hits is that I was being still, and I needed to only expose a little bit of the whole armor, and immediately they got 2 meaty shells in, and I only have 40% of my hit points remaining. Now there I hit the cupola of the other T62, but it didn't do any damage to it. I damaged the viewports, but at these kind of ranges it doesn't really matter. Now luckily he got taken out.
Identify target. Hostile.
Wonder why it's a hostile truck. Whenever I see a main battle tank, it says hostile truck. But, you know,
target eliminated.
Whatever floats their boat. Now I'm really annoyed about the fact that there is someone and I cannot see him. He hasn't penetrated me once. I try to put some blind shots in because I can see kinda where the bullets are coming from, but I really don't know where he exactly is, and he can sure as hell see me. But at this stage I realize we're losing horribly, and we have an AFK in our base, so yeah, it's pretty much over for our team. Get a snapshot at this Dragoon, try to finish him off, but not enough lead. Now, it's only 4 versus 11. And it's quite often this kind of trend, I feel, that the PvP mode is really like either you lose so that only a couple of enemy teams players die,
Identify target.
or
Tank. They hit us hard.
you win so that only a couple of your team members lose, which is, I feel, a bit odd. Maybe the matchmaker like fails hard, or maybe we just had a ridiculous amount of AFK players. Who knows? But the idea of that replay was to show the resilience of a good position, and once you get, I don't know, maybe too cocky or make a mistake, you show your flank and you get immediately punished for it a lot. So the next game I took, it was the same map, same side, so I thought, what the hell, I'll go to the different flank then. To show you, and you know, I haven't played these maps too much myself, so let's take a look what is it in the other side. It seems like it's a bit more like hill focused map. And there are tier 4 vehicles and quite some sneaky tanks and tank destroyers in this matchup, so I want to play a little bit more cautiously so that you can see the effects of not that great accuracy, and the reason that and because I'm using heat shells so that I will make the damage, so I can maximize the damage. The shells are flying so slow in comparison to AP shells that I'm pretty much unable to hit anyone who is moving even just a little bit, because it takes so much time for the shells to get there. But there I was a bit lucky, I got the connect and I got the kill. Now, I believe it was T62. Well, actually it doesn't even matter which one it was, but even though they hit my front, it did go through. Now, if you give a little bit of angle, it's really hard for them to connect again. And now we are in excellent position. I can easily just show my turret. Now, quite interestingly, I wasn't able to go through there, but I believe the heat shells have just a little bit under 200 millimeters of penetration, so yeah. Now with AP, and it goes through the front plate. So I believe this is kinda what you need to do. You kinda have to play this tank so that you find the location. At least if you're playing solo, you have to kind of find the place where you just can be comfortably. But as soon as there starts to be artillery players, they will just ruin your day. So you pretty much need your team because of the very slow rate of fire. Now, this game is a little bit campfest style game, so it's probably not that exciting to watch. But I try to make the feel of the kind of gameplay you have to develop if you want to make your armor useful. Now, I have no idea how I could pen this guy from the front. Maybe I could have hit his commander's hatch, but the easiest possible way is to just load in HE and plant it somewhere. because he had so little hit points. So while the HE is not very good ammunition in armored warfare, I feel, even when shooting at targets that have like absolutely no hit points, it doesn't do that great amount of damage. But in these kind of situations, when the enemy has very low amount of hit points, you absolutely should plant in an high explosive shell. So from this on, I do dunk the shot and won't see anyone again. So let's summarize the performance of this vehicle. It is going to be pretty much like this from this on. From this on the Shishkin tree, it has pretty much every main battle tank that follows the line is based on this chassis in a way or another. The turret armor is going to be phenomenally good. The alpha damage is going to be really favorable. And the whole armor is where its weakness kinda lies. And its strengths are, keep the front at the enemy and hope they are smaller than you. Cause if you can find targets that are lower tier or just in general smaller, that doesn't have a lot of armor penetration, you can just bully them around, because you're like mobile enough to keep your front at the enemy. And if they are unable to penetrate your front, just simply not unable to, you can just play with them and just kill them. But as soon as you start to be yourself the smallest kid on the block, and there's big tanks up ahead that just laughs off your upper plate and just shoots straight through it, well, you have to improvise a lot. You have to play like pretty much campy camp, or like more like an opportunist, so that every single time your enemy takes a shot, you try to take a peek and take a snapshot or something like that. But you can't be full-on brawler, because you're not fast enough, and if you don't have enough armor to deal with it, it's a bit, let's just say, hard to play with this line of tanks. It's like heavy tanks in World of Tanks. When your armor works, it works and you're really good. If it doesn't work, because of the matchmaking or whatever, well, you're not going to have a very good time. It doesn't mean you are utterly useless, but you're not going to be having the same kind of experience and gameplay. All in all, I feel like this line of vehicles they're pretty good. Let's just say they're very enjoyable to play when you connect your shots. If your penetration is enough with the heat shells, the amount of damage with only a couple of shots is just so big that it is very satisfying to play. And you can play with your armor quite well. As we saw, even when not directly facing the enemy, quite a lot of the time when I was being shot at with autocannon shots, they just bounced, didn't do any damage. The main battle tank guns and the tank destroyer guns are pretty much the only thing that can penetrate this vehicle. So I feel like it's, well, I wouldn't say overpowered or anything, but it is very much easier to play this tank in comparison to the Leopard 1. And I think it's like a bit more a starter friendly vehicle, but if you really want to master this vehicle, it's also really hard, because in the Leopard 1 you can just go on and camp, and whenever you get spotted, you just run away for a bit of time and then camp again. In this tank you really can't do that. So while it is quite forgiving, if you really want to master it, it really takes a lot of map awareness and planning ahead, because it's not that fast vehicle. It is not slow by any means, but it's not very fast. And you really have to work with the terrain. With the Leopard 1, you don't have any armor to begin with, so you just need to make sure you have enough gun depression to shoot over ridges. In this tank, you have to think the terrain as more like an armor buff. And then you have to start to think about, do I have enough gun depression to engage the enemies? All in all, I really think everyone should try this vehicle, or at least the T54, because it's pretty much the same kind of vehicle, and it's really easy to get. I hope you have enjoyed this replay. I tried to keep it a bit more brief than the Leopard 1 review, and hope it has been of use to you. And do feel free to leave your thoughts and improvements about this video on the comment box below. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Whiskluigers, and I hope I see you in the next video.